The inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. This morning we look at two local levy proposals. In the second part of the program, the levy for the great parks of Hamilton County. But we begin with the Hamilton County Children's Services Levy. This levy helps support a variety of services for abused and neglected children, including mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment, domestic violence programs, parenting classes, all designed ideally to keep them safely in their homes. If that's not possible, the levy also helps support the foster care system and adoption services. These services are delivered by an intertwined system of public and private agencies. The 2016 Children's Services Levy is for 2.77 mills. The millage of this levy has not increased since 1996. In fact, the levy yields $7 million less today than it did in its high point in 2007 before property values fell in the recession. For every $100,000 of valuation in property, it will cost the owner approximately $50 a year. These services are not optional. They are mandated by federal and state laws. As a result, all the proceeds from the levy are matched dollar for dollar by the federal and state governments. To discuss the levy, I am joined now by Moira Weir, the director of the Hamilton County Job and Family Services. Ms. Weir joined the agency in 1993 as a children's services worker. She worked her way up in the agency, becoming the director in 2007. Moira, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to be here, have you here. But you know, this is serious, and when I look at the material that you sent me ahead of time, indicating that 15,780 children, 1 in every 12 in our county, were touched by your services in 2015. That seems staggering to me. Is that 15,780 different children?
Yes, I mean, and we that's throughout the whole year. So we are
Right.
touching children. I mean, as you said, it's 1 in 12 children in our community are touched through one of our services, which is, you know, it's a tragedy. It just speaks to really the vulnerability of the families that we work with each day, and the struggles that they're having. And you know, we know right now 70% of the infants in care statewide are there because of heroin.
Yeah, and I think we've got some data on just the increased severity. It's not only the numbers, but some of what you were going to. So talk about the heroin. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, it just shows the complexity of the families that we're dealing with, you know, and we're trying to help and provide services for. We know just when we look at our caseload in Hamilton County, 70% of the families that we're working with currently have, you know, multiple issues going on, whether it's substance abuse, mental health, and violence, kind of all happening at the same time. The children have been exposed to so much trauma by the time we become involved, and really trying to help those families manage that trauma, find the right services for those families so we can help them heal and help them move forward. And really our ultimate goal is to try to keep children in the home and work with the community and the family to make that happen. And there's some cases when we just can't ensure the child is safe, so we look for alternative, which could be foster care or family, you know, to remove the children from the home and work with the parents on building some protective capacities, addressing the issues that they have, and then hopefully returning the children back into the home. But as you mentioned, sometimes we don't always have that success, so sometimes we then have to move those children into adoption. But you know, we really try hard to provide services so we can keep families intact and really help make sure children are safely maintained within their home.
I did a show about a month ago on kinship care, which was sort of a whole system that I didn't know much about. And I guess what struck me there was that these are, well, by and large, grandparents who are stepping forward to take care, and especially grandmothers, stepping forward to take care of children and keep them out of the foster care system. But they get paid only like half of what foster care parents. That seems to be inequities in that system.
It's a challenge in the system, I would agree. I mean, it's something, you know, we try to work with our state and federal partners on, because there's really not a lot of local dollars available to help those families. But we know long-term kids do best with families, so we really try to preserve those relationships, preserve those families, and help those families the best that we can. The child-only caseload actually in the family support system is one of the highest rising caseloads. That's specifically to what you're saying, is grandparents caring for children because there's somebody not available to do that.
Well, given the caseload given the severity and complexity of the family situations, given the increase in opiate addiction that we've tragically been seeing in recent weeks in our community. The fact that this levy has not increased over a long period of time, since 1996, I think, is what it says. Mm-hmm. It seems staggering to me. How can that be? I mean, it sounds like you've got more demands on your services, but sort of frozen at resources.
Well, we really have relied heavily on our community partners to really help us, meet our families' needs, and it really is a community initiative, like how can we come together? So we rely heavily on the mental health system, the substance abuse. We've got great partnerships with various organizations that help meet the needs of our family. We also, as you mentioned before, we're able to, really maximize those local dollars by matching them with federal and state dollars. So every dollar that we have locally, we're bringing in another dollar. So we're really trying to maximize and stretch every dollar that we have. But it really is a community-wide effort. We certainly can't do it by ourselves, and nor should we rely on public health. We rely on the schools. We rely on law enforcement, anybody that has access to information that can help us get information to keep our families and our children safe is really what we're dependent upon.
These are, as you just mentioned, mandated services. These come from laws, regulations from both the federal and the state level. And therefore the federal and the state government match what local voters put into this. The other side of that, though, is, to be honest, is that under Governor Kasich, the state budget was balanced on local government units. Job and Family Services was one of those. How much do you get from the federal government? How much do you get from the state government in those matching funds?
So we really get the majority of our money from the federal government. The state, for Hamilton County, we get roughly about 3% of our budget from the state for child protection, but we are able to draw on lots of federal dollars. And again, I can't underemphasize the importance of our partnerships locally and how we really want to, we work together collaboratively to try to meet the needs of our family. And it's really and I believe that's the way you get best results, is you have multiple people at the table talking through what's the best services for families.
When you're talking about agencies, private organizations that you're working with, let's get specific. What are some that you think you really turn to, you really look for critical help?
So we really work with, honestly, anybody within the community. We have a great partnership with the YWCA and also Every Child Succeeds right now to really hit home on this home visitation, that 0 to 5 population, because we know those children are so vulnerable. We certainly look for, we have multiple providers that help us with placement when we're looking to place children in foster care. We work with multiple substance abuse organizations that can help us really identify and assess the what's the needs are for the parent or parents in terms of what their substance abuse issues are, and then hopefully find the best treatment plan. That's really the same for our mental health, and we really rely on folks to help us do really good assessments and then make sure that we're putting in services that really change behavior and that can help us with outcomes so that we know that the children are going to be safe and they'll be safely maintained within their home.
So about a month ago I did a show with First Step Home. And pretty interesting program allowing mothers to keep their children with them during treatment and having long. Is that an agency you work with?
Yes, they're one.
It seems like a very unusual approach that has reasons for effectiveness.
So certainly anytime, when you try to treat the family in the context is collectively, holistically, I think many years ago, we would kind of take a person out of the environment and treat them and put them back, but if you haven't worked with the whole family system, you're not really helping everyone improve and make changes. So certainly we work with them, and we Lighthouse, Tabard House, Beach Acres, there's lots of providers in St. Joe's that we work with, NECO, I can go on and on, but we have, because it's really a community effort, and we really rely on the community to help us really manage our families. And I always look at it, the more ears and eyes you have on a family, the better, we have better assessment skills, then we can do better treatment plans, and we can hopefully have better outcomes.
One of the things that caught my eye was some comparative data. I'm a great believer that trying to figure something out by just looking at that one system is hard to figure out. One of the pieces of data that was shared was Hamilton County compared to other counties. So Hamilton County, your budget in this area is about 87 million, Cuyahoga about 133, and Franklin about 193. What explains, those are big disparities. What do you, in your mind, explains the disparity?
Well, I think they have bigger levies. I mean, they've been able to maximize that through levies. So that gives you lots of opportunities and options. But again, I do think one thing that's great about Hamilton County is we do have a great system of coordination of care, and we have multiple partners at the table. We work cooperatively with all sorts of systems, you know, to help make sure we have better outcomes. So I do think we have learned in Hamilton County to pool our resources together and work collectively. You know, and I would say we have wonderful staff. I mean, the staff do an exceptional job. I mean, they are going day to day in homes that many of us would be afraid to go into. They often don't know when they knock on the door who's behind there and what they're going to encounter and what might appear to be a visit to do, you know, just to kind of follow up with the family on services. They could walk into something that is unexpected, that needs immediate attention, that could take hours that day to resolve. So we are really lucky to have so many dedicated staff in Hamilton County that work really tirelessly to help make children, you know, ensure that children are safe.
And I would imagine that the strain on staff, that frontline staff out there knocking on the doors, caring for individual families, is pretty big.
It's absolutely big, and I think, you know, we've never really fully appreciated that. And recently there was a report that was released that said actually a frontline social worker is no different than a first responder, whether it's a police officer or fireman. You know, they're out there in the field day to day seeing so much trauma. And as you know, we've had some hiccups along the way with our retention and keeping staff. It's high burnout. It's across the country. Child welfare is a tough field. I mean, people see things that most of us will never see in a lifetime, and then how do they manage that, and then manage their personal life, and then really try to, I mean, there's secondary trauma when you work with a family that has some of the devastation that we're seeing. One
last thing, and it hints back at what your response on the comparative. And I just think it's important to bring this out. You were saying, coordination of care, great. But it's also, other counties have been able to pass larger levies. Is that because we have this system, Tax Levy Review Commission, which puts a cap on everything, and we've been very systematic about not raising the total amount of taxes here?
So it's a community decision in terms of the levies and the amount and the level. So certainly there's lots of checks and balances in place to make sure that we are spending appropriately and that we're using our dollars wisely.
Well, the other side of that is it's also a question of what you need. And sometimes you got to, So this is, this passed by 72% last time. One of those essential levies. So good luck on this one.
Thank you.
Can't imagine it turning out any other way. But thank you for all the work and the work that your staff does.
Thank you.
For information, please check out the website of the Hamilton County Job and Family Services at hcjfs.org/services/child-protection. Stay tuned. After the break, for the first time in 14 years, Great Parks of Hamilton County is asking voters for a levy to continue the development of passive and active green space in our county. Great Parks of Hamilton County have developed a system that includes 21 parks and nature preserves, including 17,000 acres of green space with 710 acres of lakes, 50 miles of streams, 10,000 acres of forest. It has also developed partnerships with the Cincinnati Park System to enhance trails and parks on both the east and west side of the city. For the first time in 14 years, the system is looking for voters to pass a levy. Welcome back. On November 8th, Hamilton County voters will be asked to approve a 10-year, 1 mil replacement levy, a rate passed first in 1988. The renewal levy requests 1 mil for 10 years for every $100,000 valuation in property. The owner will pay $35 per year. The funds will pay for ongoing maintenance of park properties and programs, as well as the maintenance and improvement of the 78 miles of trails throughout the parks. The funds will also help leverage partnerships with the City of Cincinnati and various townships, as well as other organizations. To talk about the levy, I am joined this morning by Jack Sutton, the Executive Director of Great Parks of Hamilton County. Jack, welcome back to
Good morning, Dan. Glad to be here.
You know, and we were talking before we just went on. I am a big bike rider and user of your trails and also walking trails. There's some really great spots. But let me just begin by saying, first off, a 10-year levy is a long levy compared to what, you know, people are used to at 3 to 5 year levies.
Right.
But 10-year levy is shorter than your 15-year levy.
That's right.
So first off, why these long levies? And secondly, why 10 rather than 15 this time?
Right. Well, for park districts, having a longer levy gives our board the opportunity to really cast their vision over a longer horizon. So it's when we're planning projects, it really needs several years out. So 15-year terms worked wonderfully the last 2 terms, but we've learned the world is changing so rapidly. And who would have predicted the emerald ash borer would have come in here and made its impact on the forests of Southwest Ohio? We had no idea. So we're backing down to 10-year levy. It makes us a little bit more nimble, a little bit more flexible, and we'll be in front of the voters more often.
So what's the implication for you on a practical level, just to sort of get at what it takes to run a park, of the emerald ash borer appearing and attacking trees? What's the practical implication of that?
Well, ash trees comprise 20% of our forest canopy, and we have to look at every one of those trees, or almost every one of those trees, and do they have a liability for a park user, park property, or a neighbor? And we've inventoried thousands, tens of thousands of these trees that are along our property lines, roads, trails, buildings, and we've had to remove many of those to protect those assets. So right now we've removed some 12,000 trees. We have 6,000 or 7,000 more left to be removed. It's been costing the park district about $400,000 a year for the last several years.
Wow, 400,000. Now I was out playing a round of golf out at Winton Woods, and I was noticing all the red marked on trees, and I said to somebody who was working there that day, what's going on here? And that was it. So
that's right.
He gave me some number for how many trees still had to be removed. So that's something you had not calculated 15 years ago.
No one.
Sort of popped up.
Right.
What are the implications of suddenly having $400,000 that you have to spend? How does that squeeze other things?
Well, obviously, decisions have to be made every year when you're looking at budgets, but when we saw the issues with ash trees and the potential liability, we had to look at our whole project list and say, what is a lesser priority? What do we need to defer till the future so that we can address these most important things now?
So, what will this money be used for, as you can see it at this moment?
Well, number one, we'll continue to maintain the 21 parks and nature preserves, continue to provide safe and clean parks. 2, continue to address or provide those services that the customers have grown to expect, our park guests. But it'll also allow us to address more critical capital infrastructure needs. So the trail around Sharon Woods Lake, for example, it's in need of repaving. We know that, and that's a project that's on the project list. New projects will also be considered, and by new, something we don't do every 10 years, but Sharon Lake, for example, is silting in once again. It was dredged in the 1980s, and it's not uncommon for reservoirs like Sharon to be needing to be redredged every 30 years. So that's on our list.
What's the implication of not dredging it?
Oh, well, it has twofold. One, it degrades the environmental habitat for the wildlife that use Sharon Lake. 2, it's aesthetically unpleasing, and it affects recreational activities. It affects our boating and fishing opportunities.
Does that also have, because you had to dredge Winton a few years ago too, I don't know how many, but does that have implications in terms of flood control too in that particular case in the Mill Creek?
Yes, Winton Woods is a flood control lake. Dredging Winton Lake was done in the mid-1990s, and by dredging it out, it does improve flood control somewhat, but more importantly, back to environmental conditions are improved and recreational use of the lake is improved.
Okay. So one of the things that I hinted at here is that the park district, Great Parks, has formed partnerships with the City of Cincinnati, both over at Fernbank and Armletter, east and west side, but also Anderson Township. There's another township.
Green Township, Delhi Township.
Delhi
right.
Township. So that's relatively new, that kind of collaborative effort. Am I right on that?
No, it's something we really embarked on in a very aggressive manner at the beginning of this last term, this last levy cycle, 2003. We know going forward that no matter what we're doing, we need to leverage that public investment as best we can. So working collaboratively with other park and recreation delivery systems. Hamilton County actually has 30 separate park and recreation agencies, and we're trying to work with all of those in a collaborative way to get things done that impact the region, impact the entire county.
What are, the parks are in many ways very developed. I mean, they are set things in some ways. But how are the demands changing? What do people want, and how is that changing over time?
Well, surveys tell us the most desired activity and the most popular activity is hiking, biking, and walking, using our trails, our 78 miles of trails. And we're also hearing from the public that they want to see trails connect to other destinations. So we've been leading the effort to bring the Little Miami Scenic Trail all the way to the Ohio River and ultimately downtown.
Oh, please, let's get that done.
It's right at Beachmont Avenue, and we have applications in play for federal transportation funding to build the bridge across the Little Miami. Once there, we're at Lunkin Bike Path and literally just 4 miles from Smale Riverfront Park. Water trails are another thing we're hearing more and more about. Paddling, kayaking, canoeing, and we have 4 rivers in Hamilton County. We are protecting lands along all 4 of those rivers. So I see us maybe getting into more paddling activities on those rivers in the future.
Okay. So one of the things you had an audit done by an outside agency, and one of the things that they recognized was you're pretty good at maximizing earned income. So where does your earned income come from? Where do your other sources, besides tax dollars, what are your other sources of funding, and how do you evaluate your ability to generate those sources?
Well, 45% of our total revenue on an annual basis comes from non-tax sources, and that makes us unique in the state of Ohio among peer park districts. We try to recover costs wherever we can, so golf greens fees, fishing, boating, camping fees. Our motor vehicle permit fee is one way, a small way in each increment that adds up to helping us offset or reduce that tax burden on the county taxpayer.
Okay. So what percentage tax, what percentage earned, what percentage grants, whatever?
About 55% comes from our 1 mil property tax, over 40% comes from earned income, and then the balance comes from grant opportunities, reimbursements, miscellaneous receipts.
Okay. So if I remember 15 years ago, because I remember doing the interview with you for the levy 15 years ago, the show wasn't that old at that time. I was shocked by 15 years. Here we are for a new one. At that time, you were interested in increasing the acreage that you had. I mean, protecting existing resources, expanding. Is that still on your list of desires, needs, wants?
Well, in a strategic fashion. So our priorities for land acquisition, which by the way, we've added 3,000 acres since 2002 as a result of the levy and leveraging outside grant opportunities. Strategically, we're looking at our river corridors. Water quality is paramount in most people's minds today, and we're protecting land along all 4 of those river corridors. So if we can
let's talk about those 4 rivers.
The Little Miami Scenic River,
okay,
the Great Miami, the Whitewater, and of course the Ohio River.
Okay.
So we own property on all those rivers, and sometimes it's disconnected. So if there's opportunities to buy a property that connects other park property, that moves the effort forward to protecting that river. If you can protect the bottomland forest adjacent to a river, you're having a direct impact on water quality.
Water quality, because all those flow into the Ohio.
That's right.
That all has impact on quality. What about the Mill Creek?
The Mill Creek, we actually are part of the headwater protection at Winton Woods, Glenwood Gardens. We're working with communities along the Mill Creek, such as Wyoming and Woodlawn, to extend the West Fork Mill Creek Bike Trail, ultimately to the Mill Creek Greenway.
Okay, and I recently did an interview with Jen Eismer about that whole effort along the Mill Creek. But that's again probably one of the most troubled streams, but challenging streams, but a lot of things are really happening there.
There
too.
are, and so much of our population is so close to the Mill Creek, so it's a very important resource.
So, to learn more about this, the best way to go is right to your website, which is greatparks.org, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Correct?
That's right.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jack.
Thanks, Dan.
And we'll follow this right up to election
Great.
night. So thank you for making Newsmakers part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week when I will be joined by the candidates for the Clerk of Courts and for the Recorder's Office. One race features a young first-time candidate and the other a long-time office holder looking to get back in the game. Have a good week.